So today we will see how to examine a case of hyperthyroidism. A case of hyperthyroidism. Thyroid gland is an important endocrine gland found in our body. And basically, it has an important role with reference to two things or two aspects. Number one, with respect to the rate of metabolic activity, and number two, for the regulation of body temperature. So thyroid gland has an important role in our body with reference to number one, the rate of metabolic activity, and number two, for the regulation of body temperature. Metabolic activity that includes catabolism and anabolism is mainly required for the synthesis of energy in the form of ATP. And the requirement of energy is variable from time to time according to our body activities. Therefore, the rate of metabolism in our body will keep on changing from time to time. And this increase or decrease in the metabolic activity rate, it is regulated, it is controlled by the thyroid hormones. Number two, second function of thyroid gland is to regulate the body temperature. How body temperature is regulated? During the metabolic activity, even under conditions of 100% normal, all systems of our body are 100% normally working. Even then, to a maximum of not more than 20 to 25% of the ingested food is converted to energy. Only this much percentage of the ingested or the taken food is converted into energy, and the rest of the percentage is converted into heat. So heat production is a major part of all our metabolic processes. And as I told you that the metabolic rate is controlled by thyroid, it means the thyroid gland, by increasing or decreasing the metabolic rate, it will also increase or decrease the production of the heat. Therefore, whenever our body is exposed to a low temperature, like if you go to higher altitudes, Taif or Aba, like this, where the climate is very cold, then immediately in order to increase our body temperature accordingly, the metabolic rate will increase. So one of the important methods to regulate temperature by increasing or decreasing the heat production is through the metabolic rate, and that is brought about by the thyroid gland. Thyroid gland perform these functions by the help of two hormones known as T3 and T4. T3 is known as triiodothyronine. And T4 is known as thyroxine. Both these hormones, they have same effects, but the difference between them is in their rapidity of action as well as in their duration of action. T3 is more potent yani stronger than T4, but the duration of action of T3 is short. T4 less potent than T3, but its duration of action is long. So both these have the same effects, and they are differing from one another in their start of action as well as in their duration of action. T3 more quick, more potent, but shorter duration. T4 delayed in action, less potent, but longer duration of action. In addition to these two hormones, T3 and T4, thyroid glands secrete another hormone which is called calcitonin. But the difference is that T3 and T4, they are synthesized, they are formed within thyroid follicles or within follicular cells of the thyroid. Whereas calcitonin is produced by the cells which are surrounding the follicles, not from within follicles, but the cells which are surrounding the follicles called parafollicular cells. So parafollicular cells, they are also known as C cells. They secrete calcitonin. Whereas T3 and T4, they are synthesized within thyroid follicle. Number 2, T3 and T4, as I told you, they are related with metabolic activity and temperature regulation, whereas calcitonin has an entirely different role. This hormone is concerned with the regulation of blood calcium level. So calcitonin is related to regulation of blood calcium level, whereas T3 and T4 with regulation of metabolic activity and body temperature. Now let's see that how these T3 and T4 are produced, synthesized. Thyroid gland, as I told you just now, It is composed of thyroid follicles. Thyroid follicles. Within thyroid follicles, a substance is there which is called colloid. Colloid is a substance found within thyroid follicles. And an important component of this colloid is a protein called thyroglobulin. Thyroglobulin. Thyroglobulin in turn is made up of amino acid tyrosine. Amino acid tyrosine. So, what is the picture? Thyroid gland contains thyroid follicles. Within follicles, a substance is there called colloid. Within components of the colloid, an important component is a protein called thyroglobulin. And thyroglobulin is composed of amino acid tyrosine. Tyrosine. This tyrosine, it is involved in the formation of T3 and T4. How? That this tyrosine from the circulating blood, it captures iodine and combined with iodine molecule. So combination of tyrosine plus one molecule of iodine, it will give rise to monoiodotyrosine. Monoiodotyrosine.
I have seen plus
Tyrosine plus one molecule of iodine.
if mono.
It will give rise to monoiodotyrosine. Mono means one. One iodine, therefore monoiodo. Yeah. Number 2, tyrosine plus 2 molecules of iodine, it will give rise to diiodotyrosine. So, monoiodotyrosine and diiodotyrosine molecules are produced by combination of tyrosine with 1 or 2 iodine molecules. So in the first step, monoiodo and diiodotyrosine are produced. In the second step, a combination between these mono and diiodo starts. So, when monoiodo and diiodotyrosine combines, it will give rise to triiodothyronine or T3. So combination of monoiodo and diiodotyrosine molecules, it give rise to triiodothyronine or T3. Similarly, combination of diiodo plus diiodo, it will give rise to T4 or thyroxine. So if 2 molecules of diiodotyrosine combine, it will give rise to T4 or thyroxine, and if 1 molecule of mono and 1 molecule of diiodo combine, it will give rise to T3 or triiodotyrosine. So once they are formed, they kept stored within the thyroid gland, and when from the anterior pituitary the thyroid stimulating hormone comes to the thyroid gland, and stimulated, these stored hormones are released into the blood. And through the blood they reaches throughout the body. Now the condition here that we mentioned in the starting part, that is hyperthyroidism. So as the name indicates, it means a person or a patient wherein the thyroid gland is overactive. And therefore, the level of T3 and T4 in the blood is more than normal, higher than normal. So that's why it is given the name hyperthyroidism. But there are other cases as well that contain lower than normal thyroid hormones in their blood. They will be called hypothyroid or hypothyroidism. So both type of cases are there. Today we will see that what picture we will found in a case of hyperthyroid patient. In a case of hyperthyroidism, what you have to do, that as the patient enters to your room, your clinic, the first thing that you have to do is that you exchange the greetings with the patient. Assalamu alaikum, wa alaikum assalam, kaifa halak, all this and that, and then shake hands with the patient. While you are shaking hand with the patient, what you have to do, you have to note down that whether the patient's hands are dry or wet. Dry or wet hands. If the patient's hands are dry and warm, it's okay. It is the normal condition. But if you found that the patient's hands are wet and cold, then you should to ask the patient that why are you so much sweating? Why are you profusely sweating? Why are you increasingly sweating? If the patient says that I don't know, since the childhood my hands are like this, then it's been no problem. Since I start it is like this. But if the patient says that I am very much worried about it, I don't know, for last 2-3 months I am profusely sweating and my hands are all the time keep wet, then it is an indication of hyperthyroidism. And why this sweating? Because due to increased thyroid activity, more metabolic rate, more temperature production, more heat production, and therefore the body starts sweating profusely. More and more sweating to reduce the temperature. So therefore, just by shaking the hand, you can find out that whether the patient has any indication of hyperthyroidism or not. Secondly, after shaking hand and finding out for dry or wet hands, the second thing you have to do is that measure the weight and height of the patient. Weight in kilogram and height in centimeters. And after measuring the height and weight, calculate the patient's BMI, that is body mass index. using the formula BMI is equal to weight in kilogram divided by height in meters square. BMI.
أول شيء
So body mass index or BMI of the patient you have to calculate by measuring his height in centimeters and his weight in kilogram and using the formula weight in kilogram divided by height in meter square. Normally in males, a BMI between 20 to 25 is considered normal. So you have to find out that whether your patient has a normal BMI or it is more than 25, so that you can say that your patient is an obese patient, or it is less than 20, so that you can say that he is an underweight patient. So what is the definition? Usually in hyperthyroid patients, in spite of the fact that their eating quantity increases due to increased metabolic rate, all the time they are eating, but still their BMI usually found within the normal range. Usually. But some cases of higher BMI you can also observe. After measuring the BMI, now you have to go to measure two aspects from the cardiovascular system. And these include, number one, the heart rate or the pulse rate, and number two, blood pressure. Most of the cases of hyperthyroid patients, they complain of palpitation. Palpitation means increased heart rate. So much increase that the patient feels very much worried about it. So usually when you measure the pulse rate or the heart rate, you will note down in hyperthyroid case presence of tachycardia. And sometimes the patients of hyperthyroid, they have paroxysms of very high tachycardia. Paroxysm means attacks. So sometimes they have attacks of very high tachycardia, but usually under even normal resting conditions, their heart rate will remain increased. So tachycardia will be there. Number two, on measuring the blood pressure, usually hyperthyroid patients, they have an increased systolic and a decreased diastolic blood pressure. Increased systolic and decreased diastolic blood pressure, so that their pulse pressure will be, what will happen to pulse pressure? Increased. Systolic increases, diastolic decreases, therefore the difference will also increase. So these two things you have to measure from cardiovascular system, that is tachycardia by pulse rate or heart rate, and number two, the systolic and diastolic blood pressure. Systolic increase, diastolic decrease. If the facilities are available, then it will be better if you record ECG of the patient, because ECG will give you a more reliable evidence about the heart rate. So if facilities are there in your clinic, then record the ECG of the patient. Then after examining the heart rate, pulse rate or the blood pressure, now come back to 2-3 more things. Number 1, check the muscle strength of the patient. Muscle strength. In order to check the muscle strength of the patient, ask him to sit down in an squatting position on the floor, on the ground. What is a squatting position? Squatting position. Squatting position means sit down like this. This is called squatting position.
Squats.
And then after sitting in the squatting position, ask him to stand up, get up, without taking support of his hands. Without taking support. If he can stand up, if he can get up, without taking support of his hands, it means that his muscles are strong, powerful. But if he says that no, I cannot stand without support, then it means that his muscles are weak. So check the strength of the muscles by asking him to sit down in a squatting position and then ask him to get up without taking support of his hands. Finally, check the nervous system of the patient. In order to get an idea about the nervous system, you have to check 2 things. Number 1, check the knee reflex of the patient. Check the knee reflex of the patient. How to check the knee reflex of the patient?
By hammer.
With the help of a hammer. With the help of a hammer. And with this hammer, with the patient sitting on the examination table like this, and his limbs are up above the ground, hanging. Then strike the patellar tendon. Like this. Strike here, the patellar tendon, there will be an extension of the limb. Observe, the limb will extend like this. Like this. So extension of the limb will occur. But what is the change thing? Every person has extension. When you strike the patellar tendon, what will be the change? The change will be that normally the extension and the return of the limb, they take place with equal rate, equal velocity, go and come back. But in case of hyperthyroidism, the extension will be very quick, but returning back will be slow. So the relaxation phase, it will be a slow phase. So the change in the hyperthyroid case that you will observe will be that extension will occur very rapidly, but it will follow the relaxation phase in a slow rate, at a slow rate. Delayed, you can say. The second thing that you have to observe in nervous system is check the fingers of the patient for the presence of tremors. For the presence of tremors. What is tremors? Did you see the old age people? Their hands are always shaking like this. If they hold anything, it will be also like this. So this fine movement, this is called tremors. If this is because of old age, it is called senile tremors. Because of old age, senile. S-E-N-I-L-E, senile. But the senile tremors, what you are doing? These are called senile tremors. But the senile tremors you can see. They are so obvious that you can see it. But the tremors which are found in hyperthyroidism, normally you cannot see. That's why they are called fine tremors. Fine. F-I-N-E, fine. Now if you cannot see, then how to find them? That whether they are present or they are absent. For that purpose, there is a special method. And that method is that you take some pieces of paper and put these papers in between the fingers of the patient, like this. Of both hands, this hand as well as this hand. And then after putting the pieces of paper in between fingers of his hands, ask him to extend his hands like this. If the tremors are there, you can see clearly that the paper between the fingers is moving. But if tremors are not there, then you cannot find any movement of the paper. So if the paper pieces between the fingers, you find them on extension of the hand moving, it means that the fine tremors are present. If paper is not moving, it means tremors are absent. And why in hyperthyroidism tremors are there? Because due to this hyperthyroid effect, or as a result of hyperthyroidism, the neuronal excitability of the neurons, it will increase in hyperthyroidism. So because of the increased excitability of the neurons, the patient of the hyperthyroidism suffers from fine tremors. Yes.
All this present
Hyperthyroidism, all sides?
all this
Not necessary. Not necessary that all these signs will be there in every patient. Some of them in one patient, some of them in the other patient, like this. Depends upon the duration of the disease. The older the disease will become, more and more signs will be there. And finally, you have to look for exophthalmos. Exophthalmos. What is exophthalmos? X means external, outside. Ophthalmos means the eyeball. Eyeball. So exophthalmos means when the eyeball comes outside. Outside means not out of the eye, means outward than its position, normal position. So what will happen that in old cases of the hyperthyroidism, old cases, chronic cases, the pressure behind the eyeball increases, or in the space behind our eyeball some edema develops, fluid will collect, and this collected fluid or edema, it will pushes the eyeball forward. Therefore these people have their eyeballs outside than the normal position, which is called exophthalmos. But how you will find that it is outside the normal? Simply ask the patient to close his eyes. Normally, when we close our eyes, our eyelids will completely cover the eyeball. The eyeball you cannot see. But when the exophthalmos will develop, when the patient closes his eye, even then you can see his eyeball. The eyelids will like this, not like this. Normally is this, completely closing. But in exophthalmos like this. So from this gap, you can see the eyeball. So very simple to find out exophthalmos, that ask him to close his eyes. If the eyeball is not completely covered and you can still see the eyeball, it means exophthalmos is there. When you find that exophthalmos is there, then ask the patient that the position of your eyes is since the start of the time like this, by birth like this, or it develops just few months before. If we say that no, since birth I was okay, it is for the last few months that I cannot close my eyes completely, it means that this is because of hyperthyroidism. Finally, when you find many indications, many signs and symptoms of hyperthyroidism, then you have to confirm your diagnosis. How to confirm your diagnosis? By asking a laboratory test for T3, T4 and TSH, thyroid stimulating hormone. So if the values of these three hormones you found abnormally high, it means your diagnosis is confirmed that this is a case of hyperthyroidism. So final confirmation of diagnosis is after laboratory investigation, which shows higher levels of T3, T4 and TSH. Yes.
Is it faster if I do this? Is it faster if I do this check first?
T3, T4 and TSH. But this test is not like a usual test. So it is not like this that without clinical examination just everybody you will ask to go and T3, T4. You have to send for this test only selected people. So first go for clinical examination, all this. If you find that there are many signs of hyperthyroidism are there, then you can send for this. Not every case. Okay? Now make groups. 4 groups, 5 groups. Divide yourself in groups and go through this examination part. Measure the weight and height, calculate the BMI, measure the blood pressure, pulse rate, see the knee reflex, and see any tremors are there or not. So all these things, and so that you can write in your